each page today.
Oh, I'm worried about it.
So, crown jewel, the second one on the page here, Ecclesiastes 1:9.
Must have gained weight as we went through those.
I want to make sure we understand this. So we all ready?
Ready.
Ecclesiastes 1:9. The last part. Okay. Well, let's read the whole verse. That which has been is that which will be. Okay. So that which has been done is that which will be done. So, this is his conclusion based on those two premises. So there is nothing new under the sun. Now, I remember the first time I saw that passage when I was working with the navigators, and when I was a new believer, maybe a year old in the Lord, and one navigator said, this verse can't be right because there's new stuff all the time. All we have to do is listen to the news, read the newspaper. We have new technology, we have new science, we have new advances. And it took me years of study of the book of Ecclesiastes to realize what he's talking about here in verse 9 has nothing to do with new stuff in the world we live in. It has to do with new stuff in the lives of human beings. That's what he's saying. In human behavior, that which has been is that which will be. In other words, human behavior in the past is the same as human behavior in the future. You know, it's not like this has never happened before in human behavior. So that which has been done is that which will be done. Again, any human behavior that's happened in the past is human behavior that's going to happen in the future. So then his conclusion is, so there is nothing new under the sun. There is no new human behavior. You know, the struggles, temptations, sins, whatever the human race in its fallen state will never encompass new dimensions. And if you think back on this, the very first set of siblings on the planet, one killed the other. It doesn't get much worse than that, than one brother killing another brother. And over just, you know, all Cain had to do in God's admonition to him was straighten up a little bit. That's it. Wasn't any big deal, but he killed Abel over it. So this is what it means. There's nothing new under the sun. Murder and mayhem of all kinds have been part of the human race from the beginning, and no one's going to invent any new human behavior. It's already happened. It's already been out there. It's already been done. So when you see some behavior in the human race, don't say, boy, that's new. What it really is you've never heard of it before. It's always been happening somewhere. But it's like homosexuality in America. Homosexuality's always been with us. You know, but we just hear a lot more about it now. And they keep telling us how many of them there are and all kinds of stuff. It's always been out there from way back in the Bible here in the book of Genesis with Abraham, for heaven's sakes. So it's always been here.
What about transgender?
Oh, well, you know, if we could investigate that, I'm sure it's been around somewhere. Yeah. Well, making eunuchs was a big deal all through the Bible. You know, that's to keep men from having testosterone and wanting to take over the... Remember that Joseph served the eunuch who was second in ruler in Egypt? And so that's been part of human behavior. That's a form of transgenderism. Let's take away your maleness so you won't have drive and energy and whatever. So stuff's always been out there. So that's what this verse means. It's not like, okay, Apple is not going to come out with a new computer. That's not what it means. You know, there's nothing new under the sun in human behavior. Human behavior has always been the same. From the time man fell into sin, he's just done a bunch of bad stuff, and it's always been out there. So that's what that passage means. So don't spend years like I did trying to figure this. It took me forever. You know, and one day somehow it dawned on me, well, this book's all about human behavior. It's not about technology, for heaven's sakes. Why you want to throw technology in there? And so it's all about human behavior. So that's one I want to make sure that we get, and we don't mess it up somewhere there. So that shows up on your sheet in the list of number 2 of crown jewels. Ecclesiastes 1:9. We want to look at another one or two here that I spent some time looking at last night. I thought we would. These three go together. So let's go over to chapter. We're going to spend some time here in chapter 7 and chapter 8 of Ecclesiastes. And one of the first things we want to do, I think, is read chapter 8. So you guys will put up with me. Okay, chapter 8 of Ecclesiastes, and then after I read this, we'll back ourselves up to chapter 7 and look at this. Solomon says, "Who is like the wise man, and who knows the interpretation of a matter? A man's wisdom illuminates him and causes his stern face to beam." Now remember what wisdom is. There's knowledge, but that's not wisdom. Knowledge is just you have some facts. Wisdom is you know what to do with the facts. You know how to put the facts together so you understand what in the world's going on. That's wisdom. There are a lot of people that have facts, but they don't have his wisdom. They don't have any wisdom. In fact, one of the little quips one of my seminary professors had, and it's traced back to Dallas Seminary and Howard Hendricks. He said, "Today in America, we are educating people beyond their intelligence." So you have a lot of people that have education, but they don't necessarily use their education to bring them to wisdom. They just have a head full of facts. In fact, I had this little discussion with Megan, my granddaughter, earlier this week about the fact that most books on education are written by people who have an education in education. That's all they have. Amen. They've actually never taught. They've actually never, they've been in education for umpteen years, and they write books telling other people how to do it, but they've never done it themselves. So that's where education theory is. So there's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is just having facts. Wisdom is knowing what to do with what you know so that it comes out the way God wants it. So I say, keep the command of the king because of the oath before God. Do not be in a hurry to leave him. Do not join in an evil matter, for he will do whatever he pleases. He's talking about rebelling against authority, the king. Since the word of the king is authoritative, who will say to him, "What are you doing?" He who keeps a royal command experiences no trouble, for a wise heart knows the proper time and procedure. Now that's interesting from Solomon, because remember, we talked before, when God asked him what he wanted him to do for him as king over Israel, he said, "Give me wisdom to know how to govern." He didn't ask for a big blanket of wisdom about all stuff, but how to govern. And the classic story of Solomon is the two women who came, and each claimed that this child was theirs. The one woman said, "No, he's mine." The other one said, "No, he's mine." And Solomon said, "Well, bring the sword over here and cut him in half, and you can each have half." So that did it. The real mother was like, "No, don't do that." So, Solomon had a huge amount of wisdom. So in that, he said, in terms of governing people, he knows the proper time and procedure. For there is a proper time and procedure for every delight when a man's trouble is heavy upon him. If no one knows what will happen, who can tell him when it will happen? No man has authority to restrain the wind with the wind, or authority over the day of death, and there is no discharge in the time of war, and evil will not deliver those who practice it. What Solomon's doing now is making a commentary on this business about governing. Even the king, who has absolute authority, can't restrain the wind. He has no authority over the day of his death, or the discharge in the time of war. And then he throws in this little comment, "Evil will not deliver those who practice it," which makes a good place for me to point out, one of these days when I get this syllabus finished, however this goes in here, I'll be back on the 11th. Remember, next week we have no ABF. We just have a service, one service next week because it's the 4th of July. One of the elements that makes Ecclesiastes so hard, and I discussed this in the syllabus, is establishing context. Solomon just jumps all over the place. So, for instance, in the Gospels, it's pretty easy to establish context. You read the passage and you go, okay, from here to here, verse 10 to 20, it's talking about this, and you get it. Well, Solomon just goes everywhere. So, it's a little hard sometimes because you'll be reading through something, you go, okay, these 10 verses make sense, and then verses 11 and 12 are all somewhere else. And you go, okay, what did he do here? Well, he just jumped off on something else. It's the way he wrote the book. So you have to be careful. That's why the best way is to make categories. And that's the outline I gave you verbally that I'll get for you in print. But so we'll continue on because he does this again in this chapter 8. He does it twice in chapter 8. All this I have seen and applied my mind to every deed that has been under the sun, wherein a man has exercised authority over another man to his hurt. So he comes back again to authority. So then I have seen the wicked buried, those who used to go in and out from the holy place, and they are soon forgotten in the city where they did thus. Thus too is futility. Then he comes to this crux of an issue of human behavior that is another key passage in the book of Ecclesiastes. I quote this more often than any passage in Ecclesiastes. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed quickly, therefore the hearts of the sons of men among them are given fully to do evil. So this applies across the board. I have sobering thoughts here for you. So in Ecclesiastes 8:11 here, Crown Jewels, which is on the second page. That's where we need to be. Top of the second page, 720, 729, 811. Sobering thought. This applies not only to capital punishment, which, by the way, the current social thought everywhere in the world is that to put someone to death does not deter crime. Well, it certainly does. That person will never commit another crime. That's as simple can get. And the people that watch that will certainly want to hesitate twice. Now, one of the ugliest things I ever saw on TV, and I saw it once, and I'm sure they will never be able to repeat it on TV, was back years ago. How many of you remember Janan Yu and his wife Leon, who were here, doctor over... Okay. He was from China. They're both from China. So this thing I saw on China, pretty ugly. Scared the bejeebers out of me. I wouldn't do drugs in China. It was a thing where they said, okay, you round up a bunch of drug dealers in China, you take them out to an amphitheater, like Ohio State University's amphitheater or Cleveland Browns amphitheater, and you bring 100,000 people, whatever the amphitheater in there will hold, and then you execute all these drug dealers in front of a big crowd. So they actually showed this on TV, and all this kind of people, like 40-some drug dealers, are all down on their knees in this amphitheater out in the middle of it. This guy just walks behind all of them, shoots them in the back of the head. Bang, bang, bang. Blood spews, they fall over. I know why they don't show that again. It's a pretty ugly thing. I'm amazed they showed it once. But, I can guarantee you the drug dealers in China at that point probably thought twice about the business they were in. They're not going to do it, I would think twice if I were in that business, because that's what's going to happen to me. They're going to drag me in an amphitheater and shoot me in the back of the head. They don't fool around with drug dealers. So, at any rate, this biblical statement flies in the face of all social thought across the world today. We simply can't execute people. But the point of this applies not just to capital punishment, applies to child discipline, applies to the workplace, applies to the military. Applies every place. You can't let an evil deed go unpunished. When our two girls, Susan and Becca, were growing up, I found this little paddle that had on it, "Eat for the seat." Well, somewhere along the way, after they were growing, that panel got broken, but Becca found me another one. And